whether those participating on Zoom count towards the minyan, which is not an official rabbinic discussion we have had. And my initial response was, I'm just going to pray we have 10 in the room so I don't need to make that call. But then I lean towards yes. And I'm seeing at least a few bits of laughter.
I agree.
I agree. I count.
I count.
Yes.
Till the end of June. So perhaps we just say that the governor says, and we're, yeah.
I mean, we do have the principle that the law of the land is the law. I'm not sure the rabbis intended that to mean for having a minyan. The vote from Zoom is that they count. You'll be shocked to learn. We love you. But fortunately, I do believe we have 10 in the room, or at least 10 in the room.
We love you too.
We love you.
Yes. So we are good to go no matter how you wish to count, unless perhaps you're my child, in which case counting to 10 becomes interesting. I am hoping you picked up on your way into the room one of our song sheets, which I even have. You will notice that Courtney is not with us this evening. She is not quite fully recuperated, and I told her to stay home so that she returns to full strength before pushing herself too much to be here, since that is advice that I often do not take myself, but it's so much easier to tell somebody else. So she should be back with us next week, which means we get to fill this space with all of our energy and song, keyword, together. So we will channel our inner Courtney and turn to only the song she planned, which I can actually sing and lead, starting with Olam Chesed, no, starting with Pure Heart. I know what order they're on the sheet, I'm just keeping you on your toes. Starting with Pure Heart as we welcome in Shabbat together. Create a pure heart in me, Great Spirit. Create a pure heart in me. Create a pure heart in me, Great Spirit. Create a pure heart in me. And renew a true soul within me. And renew a true soul within. And renew a true soul within me. And renew a true soul within. Create a pure heart in me, Great Spirit. Create a pure heart in me. Create a pure heart in me, Great Spirit. Create a pure heart in me. One there. Oh, yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da. Oh, yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da. Olam chesed yibaneh, 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 yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da. I will build this world from love, yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da. And you must build this world from love, yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da. And if we build this world from love, yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da, then God will build this world from from love. Back to Olam Chesed Yibaneh. 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 So we turn to page 2 for our candle lighting. It is my pleasure to invite forward Lana and Sarah to lead us in the blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner Shabbat.
Thank you. We turn to page 24, page 142 in the folding door. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachei Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitechem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yitkadal v'yitkadash merabayen, Yamad yivrach yirotei v'yamlik malchutei, B'chayechon u'b'yomechon, u'chayei techol beit Yisrael, B'hagala, b'hagala, u'b'zman hangarim, v'yimeru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Ve'ala Bulan Ve'almaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitba'ar, V'yishramah, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shabbat Kodesha B'rehu, Ve'lam Yipol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Laviram v'yama, v'yimeru, amen. We rise physically or spiritually for the Baruch Hu, page 28. Baruch Hu et Adonai Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bifaro ma'ariv arabim v'chochma poteach she'arim u'bishbona mishanei itim u'machalif et hazmanim u'misader et ha'kohavim v'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono borei yom v'layla kolel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה. אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו, לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים. Page 32. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel, by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them. They are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Yevod Malachuto Le'olam Va'ed. You may be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levacha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'otecha ve'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi netzavecha hayom levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta bam Meshivtecha v'techa u'v'lektecha b'derech u'v'shoklecha u'v'kumecha u'v'shartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'einecha u'ktavta amezuzah v'techa u'b'yisharecha l'leman tizkeru v'asitem et mitzvotai V'yitem kedoshim lo'echem, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, Liot lachem Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem, Emet. On page 39, we pray responsively. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again, we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot oseh, nora tehilot oseh ve'amru, Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch, le'olam va'ed. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגולו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל Israel. On page 43. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haborei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. We rise as we prepare for the Amidah and turn to page 46. Adonai, Shabbat tiftachu li yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, let my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Lekonei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומלי גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומקים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אז הגיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הפעלת הרע וחושיע, משגיח הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחפל חיים בחסד, מחיי החוב ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו משני עבר, מי כמוך גיבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממיד ומחיה, ומצליח ישועות. Yeshua, Nehmanat al-Hayot Habo, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh Habo. Atah kadosh, Shimcha kadosh, Ukedoshim b'chol yom yehalelucha Selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. You may be seated as we turn to page 55 and pray together. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Ritzeh, Ritzeh, Ritzeh Adonai Eloheinu, Be'amcha Yisrael, U'tefillah, Be'ahava tekabel, U'tehi leratzot tamid, U'tehi leratzot tamid, Avodat Yisrael Necha. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha, ve'yirah, she'otecha levadecha, ve'yirah. On the top of 59. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, atov shivcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Shalom Raham Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Raham Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Raham Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Raham Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. B'tov einecha yevarech et amcha Yisrael. B'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Raham Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Raham Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Baruch atah Adonai, Amivarech et Amo Yisrael, Vashalom. We take a moment for private prayer and reflection. Shalom Imrama, Uyase Shalom Aleinu, Be'ahod Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Be'ahod Yisrael, Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'alko Yisrael. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'alko Yisrael. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'alko Yisrael. Yase Shalom, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'alkol Yisrael. As we prepare for our Torah service, we turn to page 246 as we rise. Ki b'tzion tetzeh Torah, Ki b'tzion tetzeh Torah, U'levar Adonai Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Le'amo Yisrael, V'kedushato, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo, Gadol Adonai iti, Unerom ema Shemo yachdav, Lecha Adonai Hagedula v'hagevura, Feret v'hanetzach v'ha'od, Ki kol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, Ki kol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, Lecha Adonai ha'ma'acha, V'ha'it na'aseh lechol erosh. So it is my pleasure this evening, oh yes, you may be seated. Yesterday by the time I turned around, or last week by the time I turned around, you had all followed that direction. It is my pleasure this week to invite forward, she's already here, Rita Rich, who will be reading the Torah for us this evening and offering words about our portion as well. For those who are following along at home, you said it was page
593, I believe it was.
593 sounds more correct than the page number I gave you all last week. Yes. She will be reading from the beginning,
Verse 30, from chapter 33.
Whatever chapter this is that is covered by a piece of paper, chapter 33, verse 17, and I believe the very end of the reading goes just onto the top of the following page. As is our custom, we join in the blessing over the Torah together. Baruch Adonai Hamborach, Baruch Adonai Hamborach Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim, v'natamanu et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah. Would you like a microphone?
Is it going to be necessary?
I'm going to pose that to the room. I think we might be good. I trust your ability to speak loudly, and if I am wrong, I apologize.
Okay. Amen. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, גם את הדבר הזה אשר דיברת, אעשה כי מצאת חן בעיניי, ואדעתך בשם. ויאמר, הרנינה את כבודך,
Oh, she's coming in this late.
ויאמר אני אעבר כל טובי
By
על
herself?
פניך,
Is she
וקראתי
up with,
בשם אדוני לפניך,
with the group?
את אשר אכן, ורחמתי את אשר ארחם. ויאמר לא תוכל לראות את פניי, כי לא ירני האדם בחי. ויאמר אדוני, הנה מקום איתי, וניצבת על הצור,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
והיה בעבור כבודי, ושמתיך בנקרת הצור, וסקרתי כפי עליך עד אברי, והסיר אותי את כפי, וראית את אחריי, ופניי לא יראו. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, עשה לך שני לוחות אבנים,
Oh, they're there.
וכתבתי על הלוחות את הדברים אשר היו על הלוחות הראשונים אשר שיברת. והיה נכון לבוקר,
Guys, you doing your job?
ועלית בבוקר אל הר סיני, וניצבת לי שם על ראש ההר, ואיש לא יעלה עמך, וגם איש אל ירא בכל ההר, גם הצאן והבקר אל יראו אל מול ההר ההוא. ויפסול שני לוחות אבנים הראשונים, וישכם משה בבוקר, ויעל על הר סיני כאשר ציווה אדוני אותו. ויקח בידו שני לוחות אבנים, וירד אדוני בענן, ויצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני אדוני אל רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת. נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע והטעה. ונקח לא ינקח, פוקד עוון אבות על בנים, ועל בני בנים, ועל 30 ועל 40.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. And for the translation, again, page 593 for those following along at home. And the Eternal One said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have asked, for you have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name. He said, Oh, let me behold your presence. And God answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name eternal, and the grace that I grant, and the compassion that I show. Continuing, but you cannot see my face, for a human being may not see me and live. And the Eternal said, See, there is a place near me. Station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. The Eternal One said to Moses, Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one else shall come up with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of the mountain. So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone like the first, and early in the morning he went up on Mount Sinai, as the Eternal had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. The Eternal came down in a cloud, stood with him there, proclaiming the name Eternal. The Eternal One passed before him and proclaimed, the Eternal, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children, upon the third and fourth generations. With the words of Torah and the Torah itself in our midst, we take a moment to pray for healing. As a congregation, we pray especially this evening for Christina Lobertini-Burks, Pam Mueller, Jim Levinson, Jody Lapine, Noah Carrico, Larry Weinberger, Jody Weinberger, Ralph Schwartz, Jim Locke, Dick Levinson, Mitchell Quint, Gary Pacernick, Cicely Nathan, Linda Dean Harris, William Rossi, Rosalind Moss, Jerry McDonald, Marty Sacker, Bob Kahn, and Deborah Seidel. There are other names that ought to be added to our prayers this evening. I invite you to share them aloud in your homes and or in your hearts. We turn to the words on page 253 in the middle. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishevera imotenu mekor habracha le'amotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings healing to the sick and to all who are in need. As we look to the words on the page before, page 252, I invite you to rise as the Torah is lifted. If you have really good eyesight, you might even be able to see that there's a nun in our Torah portion that is written larger for reasons that I do not remember off the top of my head, but it's in there. I always like to point out when there's fun things about the scroll. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael. Oti Adonai beyad Moshe. Yalalai, 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 You may be seated. Are you more comfortable from this? Whichever is easier for you. I'll bring all the devices. Come on up to you. Then I'll leave all the devices.
Shabbat Shalom. Excuse me. Every generation blames the one before. Many of us are old enough to remember that pop song from the 80s that begins with those words. As a member of a much maligned generation, I have grown tired of hearing the dismissive, okay, boomer, and frustrated by the accusation that those of us who grew up in the 60s are responsible for all the evils that befall generations X, Y, and Z, not to mention the millennials. I would like to point out that, out to all our accusers, that for all our faults, we are also the generation that brought about the Civil Rights Act, that protested the war in Vietnam, that began the modern movements for women's lib and gay rights, and that made the girdle obsolete. But of course, the faults are there. Younger generations have the right to criticize our overconsumption of natural resources, our sense of entitlement to higher education and good jobs, and our overspending on luxury homes and vehicles. Of course, we might blame our parents, who, returning from World War II, took advantage of the possibilities of advancement without recognizing the burden that might fall on future generations. They could blame their parents, whose wild investments brought about the Great Depression, and on and on and on. In this week's Torah portion, God tells Moses that the iniquity of fathers will be visited upon children and children's children, upon the third and fourth generations. It is a verse that I have always had trouble with, coming as it does after God's own self-description as compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. The cruelty of punishment for descendants of sinners can severely challenge one's belief in a fair and loving deity. It was only when I came to realize that these words could be construed not as a threat, but as a warning, that God's behavior began to make sense to me. Each action we take has a host of natural consequences. What we do for good or evil will affect not only the course of our own lives, but the lives of our offspring as well. The impact of parents' decisions on their children can be seen at the level of the familial, the national, even the universal. At the family level, in a very direct way, it can begin with a woman's refusal to recognize the dangers of smoking or drinking during pregnancy. Cigarette smoking can cause tissue damage to an unborn child and increase the risk of low birth weight, prematurity, stillbirth, or miscarriage. Alcohol consumption may produce a child with fetal alcohol syndrome, leading to defects in the brain and central nervous system, physical and sensory deformities, and social and behavioral deficits. In a less direct manner, a parent who gambles or overspends the family resources will have children who learn that it is much more difficult to climb out of poverty than to slide into it. Criminal behavior and imprisonment of a parent not only bring shame upon their offspring, but strongly increase the likelihood of their offspring's future incarceration. No, there appears to be no criminal gene responsible, just the fact that children learn from their parents. One study of criminally inclined families tells of a father taking his children to see the local prison and saying, "Look carefully, when you grow up, this is where you're going to live." The author of the article states, "The boys took this not as a warning, but as a dare. All of his children were incarcerated at one point or another." On the national level, we have seen and are still seeing the aftermath of our forefathers' decision to allow slavery to be part of this country's heritage. More than a century and a half, more than the third or fourth generations, has passed since slavery was officially ended. Yet the descendants of those Africans who were abducted from their own lands and enslaved in this land are still frequently faced with inequality in education, in employment, in housing, in medical care, and in the legal arena. The struggles of many Black Americans are the result of actions taken by other people's ancestors. For many white Americans, there's a deeply emotional struggle to deal with the fact that some of their ancestors were slaveholders and that their family fortunes were built on a foundation of enslaved labor. Even those of us who have no such family history, whose grandparents were toiling in Russian shtetls many years after slavery had been abolished in America, live with the consequences of decisions made in the distant past. Not all decisions that have negative impact on posterity are born of evil intent. For centuries, it was believed that human activity could not alter climate, or that planned human activity, clearing trees, plowing fields, irrigating a desert, could actually benefit climate. The belief that rain follows the plow was held by farmers and agricultural scientists until the Dust Bowl years proved it tragically wrong. Even when scientists began to realize the existence of the greenhouse effect in the late 19th century, they did not necessarily see it as a problem. Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius, I hope I pronounced that right, wrote, "By the influence of the increasing percentage of carbonic acid in the atmosphere, we may hope to enjoy ages with more equable and better climates, especially as regards the colder regions of the Earth." So here we are, faced with rising oceans, disappearing land masses, and a future without polar bears and other species that inhabit our land, our world. Here we are, confronting the legacy of slavery and racism that has an impact on all areas of society and that threatens the future of our nation. Here we are, struggling to help children overcome the trauma of parental shortcomings. Jewish tradition tells us that God intended us to be stewards of the earth, protecting nature and planting for future generations. The Torah tells us again and again that we are to care for the stranger and to recognize the shared humanity of all people. And centuries of Yiddishkeit have made family values and caring for children an essential part of Jewish life. As Jews, we should feel it necessary to act on those teachings. One of my favorite sayings goes, "We can't turn back the clock, but we can wind it up again." We can't erase the past, but instead of simply wallowing in guilt or anger over the transgressions of our ancestors, we can refuse to create similar conditions for our descendants. We can make every effort to see that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren do not suffer for our actions. We owe it to posterity to take God's warning about the sins of the parents seriously and to act on them. We know God's will. May it be our will as well. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rita. Those were important words. I always love new and different ways of looking at our Torah, especially when I am not the one who needs to write them. It is a pleasure to share the bima this evening, especially when I'm down a prayer leader. So I picked a good week, like 6 weeks ago when we planned this. As we begin to conclude our Torah service, we rise and turn to page 256 to return the Torah to the Ark. Now we're going to start with Eitz Hayim. That seems like a better plan for singing together. Eitz Hayim lama chazima v'tomveha merusha ternaveha narenoam v'chol netiloteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva kadesh yameinu kekedem kadesh yameinu kekedem. The words of Aleinu can be found on the bottom of page 282. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tekilu l'yotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'lei harasot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chakinu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש be seated. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, hope, dream to be and oh to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth in recent days. As a congregation, we are in a period of Ani Nut for Pat Bloom and a period of Shloshim for Rick Lieberman, Ron Gilbert, and Howard Bayer. We recall those who died at this season in years past with the yard sites of Esther Adler, Mark L. Barrar, Patricia Boyer, Helen E. Bramson, Steve Cox, Maxwell F. Ettlinger, Charlotte Fox, Harold Freed, Tony Friedman Caruso, Joan Goldfleece, Rose Asher Goldswig, Jenny G. Greenberg, Mary Gross, Rebecca Hackle, Geraldine Hoover, Herman Israel, Flora Israel, Morton Karp, Bernard H. Lehman, Jerry A. Levine, Benjamin N. Levy, Norman Lippard, Esther M. Littman, Henrietta Lotney, David A. Maybrook, Carolyn Miller, Ethel Jaffe Polska, Louis J. Pataski, Herbert Mark Reiser, Nathan Reinheimer, Marjorie Ritchie, Louis Roshashin, Blanche Semmelman Roshashin, Francis Lampkin Ross, Louis Sapinsley, Jules M. Sapinsley, Anna Schulman, Benjamin J. Shaman, Robert Stein Sr., Douglas Thompson, Leslie Weber, Arnold Weiss, and Sarah P. Zolk. There are other names that ought to be added or pronounced more correctly. I invite you to add them.
Read Jim Vandenvoort.
Invite those remembering or in mourning to rise first. Turning to page 294, we join them standing as one congregation in strength and support. Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash, Shmei Rabbah, V'alma Divrach Pirute, V'amlich Machute, V'chayechon U'v'yom Nechon, U'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agala U'v'zman Karib, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mivarach, Le'alam Olalei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yit'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal. Shemei d'kudashah rihu. Le'ela mipol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Ta'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba v'yitshemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Osei shalom v'imrumal. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Zikronam livracha, that their memory should always and only be for a blessing. You may be seated. We'll conclude with Osei Shalom. The words can be found at the end of Mourner's Kaddish, the same melody we sang earlier. Osei Shalom Livracha, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'alo Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'alo Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'alo Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'alo Yisrael. There will be wine and juice and grape juice in the hallway for those who wish to partake of your own, but we will, for COVID safety, recite the blessings together in here. If you would like the words of Kiddush, they can be found on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzav b'hadu, v'shabbat kodsho v'ahava u'ratzon yitlilanu, zikaron lema'aseh b'reishit, kivu yom tehillah levikrei kodesh, zecher tziyat Mitzrayim, Kivanu b'charta, ve'otanu kidashta, v'kol ha'amim, v'shavat koshecha, ve'ahava u'ratzon, inchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh Hashabbat L'chaim. We'll join in Motzi. Motzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz v'tei avon. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everybody. It has been wonderful to pray with you this evening. Thank you again to Rita for beautiful words of Torah, both from the scroll and from your heart. For those who are joining for Torah study in the morning, Judy Heller will be leading. It's a hear from congregants kind of Shabbat. And I am Judy. Hi, I'm waving at you, though this camera's off, so I guess I'll wave at you over there. Torah study is Shmooze at 9. Torah study starts 9:15-ish. For those who wish, and there should be cookies out in the hall, so please feel free to stay and eat and schmooze or grab a bag on your way out. We made them portable too. Calories don't count on Shabbat, I promise. Shabbat shalom.
Hello.
Shabbat shalom.
Yes, and if anybody wants to come up and say hello, you can. Scott should be able to switch this over to gallery. I do not have the button to do that, but we can at least hear people who are talking.
There we go.
Oh yeah, you can kind of see my bottom.
There we go.
Shabbat shalom.
I've not been entrusted with the tablet for the neat bar yet. Thanks to Zan knows when she gives it to me, she's not getting it back. I heard somebody talk about generational stereotypes.